Hey guys, this is Kyle from thefinancemajor.com. Today we have Jonathan here. He is currently in his third year at a major U.S. investment bank in New York City. So, for those of you who aren't familiar with how investment banking works, so a lot of people get the two confused: commercial and retail banking and investment banking. So, commercial and retail banking is to the average everyday person for the most part. So, checking accounts, savings accounts, personal loans, small business loans, things like that. But investment banking, investment banks, they do business with large corporations or high net worth individuals. So, just to give you a little bit of context there. So, Jonathan is actually he's an internal client advisor at a major U.S. bank. And Jonathan, could you give us a little bit of background on yourself? So
Absolutely.
maybe where you went to school, what you majored or minored in.
I can do that. Yeah. So I grew up in the middle of the Midwest, so Indiana to be exact. Went to Ball State University in Muncie and double majored in finance and accounting. Very low key public university, but I met a lot of great people there. And if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be where I'm at.
Nice, nice. So what originally got you interested in finance versus accounting? Because I know you originally majored in finance and accounting. So what
I
made you
did.
choose?
Yeah. So I understood that accounting was going to give me a very procedure based fundamental knowledge of business as a whole. It's the language of business.
Right.
I knew I wanted to understand that, but at the end of the day, I was extremely intrigued by finance because a lot of it was very theoretical, if you will.
Yeah.
And I found that whenever I was taking finance and accounting courses, the people within both sets of classes were extremely different.
Yeah.
There were definitely pros and cons to both sets, but I found myself most identifying with those within the finance major. Um, Typically more robust, type A, outspoken,
Right.
go getters. Now, don't get me wrong, I have a lot of great friends that are in accounting that love what they do, but I knew that over the long term, if I was choosing a career path, that finance intrigued me significantly more.
Right.
I liked the way that it challenged me. I liked knowing that there's nothing certain and that you're
Yeah.
just doing your best to project whatever it is that's coming next.
Right. And one thing I like to say about finance is one reason I really liked it was so I had accounting, I had finance, I had economics classes. Accounting is kind of your fundamentals, it's your base level, it's the language of business. Economics up here, it's a lot more philosophical, very theoretical, but finance was a nice midpoint for me and
Sure,
probably Jonathan as well, where
absolutely.
you definitely still have the fundamentals of business. You still have the core, but there's also some theory in there. It's hard to explain, but that's one of the reasons I chose finance as well. So, could you briefly describe what you do as an internal client advisor at this investment bank?
Absolutely. So I work specifically in the sales portion of the organization. So at the end of the day, whether we want to say it or not, we're looking to add value to our clients, which are typically brokers or advisors, in a way that allows us to position our investment solutions. And the way that we do that is by providing our insights from a very large uh, bulge bracket bank, whether it be on the macro economy or more microeconomic situations that allow these advisors to position themselves and their clients, most importantly, in the best way possible. And we help with things such as manager selection and portfolio construction along the
Right.
way, with the end goal, like I said, being to position our solutions. So it's more of a sales oriented role, but at the end of the day, none of it would be possible if you don't have a very firm grasp on the economy and how what we have as a bank can bring value to these advisors and really help them at the end of the day, help their clients get from where they are to where they want to be.
That makes sense. So, for this role, what certifications, what kind of things were you required to get in order to buy or sell securities
Yeah.
or advise clients regarding your products?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and it's one I've been asked pretty continuously. So when I first graduated college back in 2016, two of the licenses that I had to have were the Series 6 and the 63. Now, obviously, stepping into the role that I'm in now, the Series 7 was required. So 6 is kind of null and void. But I would say, given where I'm at now, the 7 and the 63 were most important. When I first came on out of school, though, I was told that I had a certain period of time to satisfy both those requirements. And then as long as you satisfy them, you can stay with the firm and continue to grow and develop. My personal understanding and my experience says that as long as you studied something within finance, it should be a pretty easy task, even if you didn't study finance or business in general. If you put in the time and the effort, they're two very attainable tests to pass. I personally didn't have any issues. I know people that did, but I think it all comes down to just knowing what you want and being willing to do whatever it takes to get there.
Cool. Very good.
Yeah.
So I know you had a little bit, your route to your current career was a little bit different than most. So
Sure.
could you describe the events that led up to you receiving and accepting a job offer at your current company? So maybe how did you prepare? How did you know this was the right company for you?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I would say that coming from a non-target school in the Midwest, I really had my work cut out for me. And what I mean by that is I had these very large aspirations, but no one had really blazed a trail before me.
Right.
And so it was kind of left to myself to develop relationships and to hopefully find opportunity to get from where I was to where I wanted to be. And so one of the ways that I did that was through networking. And so where I grew up, there was a CFA society full of people that I aspired to be like. And so I literally went up to a professor one day and said, listen, if it's okay with you, I'm going to skip class tomorrow to go to this lunch. And so I bought a student membership, went to the event the next day, shook a lot of hands, met a lot of people. And thankfully I was in the right place at the right time. And one thing led to the next. And before I knew it, I was interviewing for a position within this institution that I really wanted to work for. To give you some background, I had applied for every single bulge bracket bank except for this one because, quite honestly, I didn't think I was good enough. And in doing so and in building those relationships, I was fortunate enough to be given the opportunity, through the course of several conversations
Right.
and a few interviews to step into a very entry-level role and use the skill set that I developed in school to open up doors and find myself in a position that I really wanted to be in.
Right. So what do you think made you stand out to other candidates throughout this process? So when you met this guy, what did he like about you? What got your foot in the door?
I think a lot of it comes down to just a very, very simple answer, and that's a difference in perspective. So a lot of people that I work around, I am slightly different in the fact that I didn't come from the East Coast. I didn't go to an Ivy League school. I didn't necessarily have the pedigree that a lot of people expect to find in these type of roles. And so knowing that I wanted to be there kind of forced me to develop a sense of tenacity and persistence that I probably wouldn't have developed otherwise.
Right.
And I'm not saying other people don't have those two character traits, but it's something that I really believe set me apart in the interview process. And so I would say that I brought a different perspective to the team. I grew up in a farm town, much like you. And none of my family worked in a white collar job,
Yeah.
and quite honestly, that I'm very happy that was the case,
Yeah.
because it gave me a sense of understanding as to what the average American is dealing with day in and day out.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, I wanted to bring my perspective to a bulge bracket bank and do what I can to contribute to better outcomes, regardless of what that may be.
Yeah.
And I think that perspective, that tenacity, and that drive really helped me set myself apart.
Yeah.
Now, was I the smartest person in the room?
Absolutely not.
I was not. I was an average student at best. But the great thing is I literally received an email not even 2 hours ago from one of my professors from school, just touching base. And I wasn't the smartest student, but they knew that I had the drive. And I developed relationships with professors, with working people, and those will get you so much farther than you think. Yeah. Just put in the time, put in the effort, do what you know is right, and I'm convinced that one way or another things will typically work out for the best.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and that's how it works. Getting any job, really, it's all relationship based. It's all about making those connections. It sounds so simple, but you're not going to get the job that you want filling out 20 applications a day. You have to meet the right person, or you have to put in the work to have someone introduce you to to someone who can get your foot in the door. That's what happened in my situation. So
absolutely,
it's definitely about networking and getting out and meeting people. So
and to piggyback on that, I think A lot of people fall into the trap of just simply going onto a site like LinkedIn or whatever it may be and uploading their resume and the exact same bland cover letter dozens and dozens of times every single
Yeah.
week, not knowing that at the end of the day this is a very relationship oriented business. And I think, and if you really want to break into it, if you don't come from the pedigree that's been kind of groomed for the industry, I think that it, it goes a long way to really just network and shake as
Yeah.
many hands as possible, write as many handwritten letters as you possibly can. And eventually, one way or another, the persistence really does pay off.
Yeah, and I agree. One really good book recommendation that I give regarding this topic is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie.
Great book.
It's all about understanding how people work and kind of really to get what you want in a nice way, a respectable way. But that's a really good book.
Be pleasantly persistent.
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
exactly. So for your current role, what exactly was the interview process like? So what kind of questions did interviewers ask you? Were they
Yeah.
behavioral, technical? Maybe give a few examples of what that was like.
I would say there was a mix of both. I think first and foremost, they were more behavioral because at the end of the day in this industry, you're going to be working with the same group of people
Right.
for long periods of time. I typically get in the office, call around 7:15 every
Yeah.
morning, and there are some days I don't leave till 7. Now it's not every day, but for the most part, I'm young in the role, and so I'm doing my best to develop myself however possible. And as a result, you spend a lot of time with these people, and so I think fit is extremely important. Who are you? What motivates you? Why do you want to do what you do? Are some very simple but very important questions that I was asked, and you have to have robust answers to those questions, or otherwise you're not going to even be considered. Um, but along with that comes a technical side. You have to be able to discuss the markets. You have to be able to discuss, certain economic themes that are taking place
Right.
that are driving what's taking, what it is that we're seeing day in and day out.
Right, right.
And without that, you're not going to be considered. So I'd say it's a healthy balance of both, to be
Yeah.
honest with you.
Yeah, I totally agree. The behavioral side was really important. It was very interesting when I was interviewing for internships. It seemed like, I mean, it's going to differ for any company, industry, whatever, but it seemed like when I was interviewing for smaller companies, the interviews were always more technical, and when I
Sure.
was interviewing with more junior people within the firm, it was always more technical because they're the ones that are, you're going to have to cover for them. So they want to know if you know the material. Whereas the managing director is the more senior people. They just want to know your character, if you're a good person, if you're going to fit in with the team. So it seemed like I always got behavioral questions at the larger companies, the larger
Definitely.
firms. And he made a very good point on the technical side. You definitely have to keep up. In finance, they want to know if you're keeping up with the market, with current events. Are you reading the headlines? Are you just reading the headlines? Are you reading the articles too?
Headlines can be deceiving.
Yeah, and what's the Fed doing? Why is it important what the Fed does? Did they raise interest rates? Did they not? And how does that affect the economy? What's going on in China? How does that affect us in the U.S.? You don't have to be correct if they ask these kinds of questions. If they want to know, what's going on in the market, but you should have some kind of opinion. You don't have to be right, but you should have some kind of opinion, showing that you have thought about these things, you have read about them. It makes a huge difference.
And I think that's important. I think that having well thought out opinions is extremely meaningful when a decision is being made because at the end of the day, they can teach you what they need to teach you. They can show you the ropes and help you grow as a professional,
Right.
but you have to have the natural curiosity or otherwise all their work is going to be in vain.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, if you don't enjoy what you're doing in this industry, you're not going to last.
Yeah.
And if they're looking for someone that's going to rise through the ranks over time, you have to have the passion, you have to have the natural curiosity, and you just have to be able to connect the dots. Obviously you're not always going to be successful in doing so, but as long as you have the drive and the desire to understand what it is that you're doing, I think that goes a long way in employers' eyes.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's why you see some of these massive investment banks hiring maybe some Ivy League grads that majored in theater, history, working as an equity research analyst or in investment banking. It's true.
I know of someone
It's just
in that
about the
space.
intellectual curiosity and are you willing to learn? Are you a fast learner? and are you a good person? So, and
Definitely.
can you spend 8 to 12 hours with that person every single day?
Absolutely.
So, um, so what's the biggest piece of advice that you would give to students during their internship search or their job search?
I would say at the end of the day, it comes down to knowing what you want and not settling for something less. Um, I would be the first person to raise my hand and say that I wasn't the ideal target candidate for a lot of bulge bracket banks. I came from, like I said, a very humble background in Indiana. Wasn't necessarily groomed for a position like this, but I would say that if you can just come to the table with a different perspective and be willing to shine light on things that perhaps a lot of other people would overlook,
Right.
um, I think that brings a lot of value, not only to the team, but to the organization as a whole. And I would say that, when it comes to things that are going to set you apart in the interview process, I would say just be willing to be genuine, be authentic, know your story, know why your story is important because we all have a story and and every one of our stories is important, and be able to just weave that story into the function that you're applying for.
Yeah.
For me, it was I'm not willing to accept something that's less than excellent. I'm
Right.
willing to work hard. I want to know the ins and outs of what I'm doing, and I was able to tie in a lot of my past experiences, whether it be construction, whether it be real estate title research, or just student government in my school,
Yeah.
to every position that I applied for. And quite honestly, while I only got one offer from a bulge bracket bank that I eventually went on to accept, I will say that in the other interviews that I had at more regional firms, my hit rate was probably 75% plus.
Really.
Almost I love to interview,
Yeah.
for one. It's a challenge that I've always enjoyed, but weaving my own experiences and my own perspective into a role is something I really enjoy.
Yeah.
Because it's extremely relevant to what we do. And I think that being able to do so shows that you're able to think on your feet, you're able to connect dots, and at the end of the day, help an organization achieve what it is looking to achieve.
Right. It's a really good point. It is all about your story when you're interviewing. You have to have your story. You have to have your dots connected and why it matters. That's a really good point. I'm pretty similar to Jonathan in the fact that I also worked construction. I worked on a farm. I did not have any internship experience before I started my job at the current bank I work for. And I was actually I felt embarrassed to mention some of these things the first or second times I interviewed.
But you learn to embrace it.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
realized that people actually value hard work and the perspective that you have compared to some of the other people. So I know people might want to be working in corporate finance or different areas of finance, but if you're in investment banking, that's in New York City, which is where we are. You're typically competing against students on the East Coast that have gone to Ivy League schools or very prestigious schools. So you've got to find a way to stand out. A lot of them may have very similar backgrounds, and you're very different. You have to embrace your difference and really be able to weave your story in a way that works for you.
Yeah. I'm not saying, like, when we say weave your story, I think it's important that we highlight that you're always genuine, you're always authentic,
Right.
and you're always truthful. But there are characteristics from your story, from my story, from whomever's story it may be, that you can utilize as selling points for yourself, regardless of what the role may be. So when we say weave your story, I think it's important that we notate that you're never fabricating anything,
Right.
but you're being true to yourself, regardless of what that
Right.
may mean, in a way that allows you to really showcase who you are as a person and as a potential teammate to these organizations.
Right. Selling points that you want to emphasize about yourself.
Definitely.
Exactly. So when your department is recruiting students, or maybe when you're recruiting students yourself, what exactly are people looking for on your team
Yeah.
or within your division? Is it GPA? Is it school prestige, leadership roles, work ethic, internships, etc.?
I would say that every single one of those that you just named is extremely important. But work ethic probably tops all of them. We work in an industry that's always evolving, it's always changing, it requires a lot of time, and it's a labor of love at the end of the day. If you don't love what you're doing, like I said probably about 10 minutes ago,
Yeah.
you're not going to last. So work ethic and just a desire to grow within the industry, I would say, is most important. You don't need to know everything out of school, but you have to have the basic building blocks, such as a hardworking personality, a desire to learn, a desire to be helpful,
Right.
and a sense of humility. Your colleagues can help shape you and mold you into who it is that the organization needs you to be. But without those basic building blocks, you won't succeed.
Right.
Obviously, you have to be extremely competent. I'll be the first to tell you that, like I said previously, I was an average student at best.
Yeah.
I just knew how to build relationships. But at the end of the day, I understood that I knew what it is I was talking about. I had a desire for the financial markets and for finance as a whole. And I think that, when you take everything and you combine it, regardless of what that may be specifically for you, I think that it produces a candidate that presents promise in some way, shape, or being.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Yeah, so as a final question here, is there any reading material that you recommend? Maybe
Yeah.
business books, self-improvement books, or maybe just some online resources or newspapers?
Absolutely.
What's going to help a finance
I think
major?
obviously finance major.
Yeah.
That's the name of the channel. I think you should absolutely be reading at least the front page of the journal, not only the main leaflet, but also the markets and finance section.
The Wall Street Journal.
Every single day. I read it every single morning when I'm on the subway.
Right.
Saturday morning, I leaf through Barron's. But more importantly than that, I think it's just important to be well read.
Yeah.
One of my favorite books, it's the easiest book to possibly read. It's called The Compound Effect.
Mm-hmm.
And it just talks about the importance of everyday, little mundane decisions. Do you hit snooze or do you wake up the first time it goes off? Do you better yourself or do you watch TV? Just the little things here and there that you think are extremely insignificant.
Yeah.
Over time, they add up and they equate to something.
Kind of like a snowball effect.
It is.
There's one guy that I like to follow, James Altucher, and he talks about the 1% rule. So every single day, just finding some way in your life, some aspect of your life to improve 1%.
1%.
And it's just going to snowball. You're just getting better and better. And it doesn't have to be in the same area of your life. It doesn't have to be, just financial concepts or learning how to get an internship or job. It's any aspect. And they all eventually connect the dots and they all move you towards a bigger goal.
I agree. And that's the thing, is the 1% rule. I mean, like you said, it applies to so much more than just finance. It's being a better person, being 1% nicer, being 1% more empathetic, whatever it may be. I think goes a long way. But specifically in finance, if you just find a way to improve yourself 1% every day, or do something that seems insignificant now to have a longer, more impactful legacy, if you will, I think is extremely valuable. But just be well read. Read The Compound Effect. It's a great book. But also just do your best to develop the basic skill set that you need to have post college.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Jonathan. This has been really good. I hope you guys took a lot away from this interview. We'll see you next time.